Welcome to the first tutorial of the Understanding Spreadsheets as an Engineering Tool. This first tutorial is called Tools. We're going to talk about the different programs that you can use for spreadsheets. We're going to talk about how to set tabs, how to move them back and forth. We'll talk about how to entering text and numbers. We'll talk about setting up number styles. We'll talk about automatic column widths. We'll talk about how to set your own column widths. We'll talk about turning the grids on and off. We'll talk about highlighting, text borders, text colors. Hopefully by now you have now downloaded the Spreadsheet Training.xlsx. Regardless of what program you're using, you're now seeing them. There are three big ones out there: are Microsoft Excel, OpenOffice Calc, and of course Google Docs. They all, which one you do, most of them all behave the same way. They all have about the same menus. They almost all have the same types of things across them. If you look across the top, you'll have different menus, different things along the way of how to do different stuff. The home one is by far the one we're going to use the most. So you'll see most of the stuff about fonts, alignment, numbers, inserting, filling, all that stuff is along the top. That's all the different menus. Across the bottom, you'll see these different tabs. And if I click on the different tabs, I'll see the different sessions that we're going to be talking about as we go along here today. You can set up as many of these as you want to. You can grab them and move them around and reorder them. And if you have one, you go here and you go, I really wish I had a new tab. I go to the end. You'll see a little star there beside that one. I can click on that and say, boy, I didn't have a new one. It'll call it some default name. I can hit the right mouse button on it and say I want to rename it. And this is my extra tab. And you'll use this later if I need to do any kind of calculation or something off session. So all the different programs have a tab. You can insert a new tab. We just talked about. You can delete a tab. We just entered that new one called Extra. I can come across here, highlight it, hit the right mouse button and say I want to delete it. I'm not going to, but I could. Tabs are a way of, so I can save one file, but I get a lot of different data, a lot of maybe even different kinds of data on different sheets. I can, like I said, I can rename them and I can also move them around if I want to. Next thing we want to talk about is entering numbers or entering anything into Excel. When I'm in Excel and I type in the number 123, you notice it jumped to the right. When I move my cell block up there, it says I'm in block number F79. F is the column, 79 is the row, and the contents are 1, 2, 3. If I come across here and I say I want that number times 2, I entered that formula, it was 246 because it took 123 and multiplied by 2. Okay, I started that with a number. If I had started that with a letter like Thomas, there's my formula. It will take Thomas times 2. Thomas times 2 is not a good number. If I go back up here and type 6, all of a sudden my number comes back in. So if I start with a letter, it thinks it's a string. If I start with a number, it thinks it's a number. What happens when I want to do something with like a minus sign, or I want to type in a number? I want to type in the number 8, but I want it to act like a string. If I want to make it act like a string, I can do a quote mark and 8. And 8 now is acting like a string. You notice it moved to the left-hand side. The left-hand side. You notice it still did 16 because it knows that 8, even though it's a string, is still the letter 8. But what if I wanted to type in 7, 11? Okay. 711 is a number, but it doesn't look like a number, so that string you can't multiply by 2. If I had typed in 711, it would have been just fine. I'm going to make this column a little wider. It would have been just fine. If I want to force something to be a string or a formula, I could type the word equal sign. You notice this right here? Notice how this started? It started with an equal sign. I could have done the same thing. I could have said equal to times this. It would enter a formula. I could not enter 2 times that, because when I tried to do that, it took the 2 and an asterisk and made it to a string. So I can add it start with a quote, turn it into a string, put an equal sign, turns it into a function. So I can enter different things depending on what I want to do. Usually it's a good idea to use numbers where you want to use numbers, and use letters where you want to use letters. Try to start everything with a letter if you can, but you can't always. Okay. Oh, while we're here, I'm typing in 8. And here I'm going to do this divided by 3. When we think about that for a second, it's actually 2.666666 and just keeps on going, right? My column here is a little narrow, so I'm going to make my column really wide. When I made it really wide, get rid of this other old string, notice what it did? It filled in the blanks. I'm going to come up here and tell it intentionally, please decrease the number of decimal places. I can decrease it. I can also increase it. In fact, I can increase it to the point where it doesn't fit anymore. So I'm going to come grab that column width and make it wider. Okay, all that's really great. I just set the column width. I just changed the number of decimal places. All of that's really cool. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type in a number. I'm going to type in my name. When I type in my name, you notice it goes across the column, but I want that column to actually be as wide as my widest set of numbers or widest string. I'm going to double click on this column, and it just automatically made the column width so it would fit. Okay, so if I had 1 divided by 3.2, not a formula, equals 1 divided by 3.2, it gave me that. I double clicked on it and it made it 4 decimals because that's what it really, really is. You know, so it just made the column width the right column width. Okay, if all of that had been in this column, nothing would have changed because Thomas is wider than that. So the auto column width would only do this. So let's try this again. I'm going to type in Thomas. I'm going to type in my last name. I'm going to type in UNT. And I'm going to type in Excel is good. And I'm going to double click here. And it made it as wide as the widest string in that column. So that's turning on column widths. All this is really good. If you'll notice my background screen, there are no grid marks. I'm going to go up to View, and here I'm going to turn on grid lines, and now my spreadsheet looks like a spreadsheet. Okay, sometimes that's nice to work on. Those will not print. You notice they're very light blue. They won't print. I'm going to turn off the grid lines. I prefer to work this way with no grid lines. Sometimes I turn on the grids. I don't want to see the formula bar, which is, no one ever said that ever, but you notice it just went away. I want my formula bar. Now the headers I may not care about so much. Headings, I might get rid of them. So I can make my screen a little bit more user-friendly. I do like headers. I do like my formula bar. I do like my grid lines sometimes, but if I'm trying to do a presentation or something like this, I want them off. I want to look prettier. Okay, so that's grid lines. We just talked about column width, we talked about automatic, we talked about changing the width, changing the height. I can, just everything I just talked about doing on a column, I can also do on a row. I can come over here, highlight that, and move it with my mouse. I can make that particular row much, much taller. If I double click on it, it'll go back and make it automatic height. It'll fit whatever the font was. Okay, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to intentionally grab it, make it really big. I'm going to come grab this, and I'm going to change this font to a bigger font. I'm going to double click on it, and it makes it perfectly fit, so it fits that column for that particular row is now at the right height set. Okay. The last thing we want to talk about is, well, we just talked about views, we talked about those, was changing the different things about the particular font and color. If I have a font and I want to show something different, I can come up here and pick anything that might be in my built into my computer. I can change the font. I can come up here and say I don't want it bold, I don't want it italics. I do want it underlined. And it's changing it on the fly as I'm doing it. I don't like that color of text. I wished it was green. I just changed it to green. I come back to it and I say, boy, I wish the background of it was orange. So I can change the text font. I can change the color. If I just grab it and say, I just wish it was just a little bigger font, that'll go to the next one that's available. That's a little too big. I'm going to make it down a little bit. Of course, I can always pull it down and put exactly what I want. Say that size 13 font is exactly what you want, and you look through this list, 13 is not one of the available ones. I can still come up here and type in a 13. I can still type in, hit undo, hit escape. I want to change that font size to 13. And it'll pick it as a size 13, even though it's not one of the standard sizes, it will use that size. And last but not least is, I like borders. I add borders all the time. I'll have a particular thing and I want a border. I'll come up here and I have these choices. I can do all these different kind of borders. I can say, I want no borders around that particular cell. I'm going to highlight these 2 or 3 cells. I wish those cells had borders all around everywhere. Notice those kind of look like grid lines. Only thing different here is those borders print. I can come across here and I can say, oh, I want those to be faint, and I wish the outside was really, really thick. I wish the outside, I'm going to come up here and say more borders. And I wish the outside was thick and that. I just made a new rule for how to set up different borders. I can change borders any kind of style I want. Okay, all of these features are all available in every one of the different kind of a spreadsheet tools, whether you're using Excel, Google Docs, or OpenOffice Calc. See you in the next session about functions.